push.
Okay.
people can start taking their seats, we're going to get started again in just a minute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Did everyone enjoy lunch?
Just be able to sit down.
Good. Now you have to stay awake. We promise it'll be exciting. My name is Megan Brown. I work for the National Park Service, but I'm also on the board of APTDC. So we're very pleased to have all of you here. And we just want to thank again our partner in this is with Mount Vernon and the library here. So we're very grateful for having this fabulous space and fabulous screen for the day. Just quickly, we're going to move into the afternoon session. And this is just a little bit about APT, and then reminding you that if you want your education credits, we need to get that documentation from you. So move on from there. And here are the learning objectives for this afternoon. So we're going to be looking at the strengths and limitations of digital data capture, as well as understanding using infrared thermography and laser scanning devices, and then also bridge into the use of drones. Although unfortunately we can't fly as a drone here because we're in a no-fly zone. So unfortunately, I kept telling everyone we're going to fly a drone, so I did lie a little bit just to get you here, but that's okay. So to kick off the afternoon, I would like to introduce Rich O'Connor, who's one of my coworkers at the National Park Service, and heads up our Heritage Documentation Office, which includes some of our oldest programs in the Park Service, being the HABs, HARE, and HOWS. And if you don't know what those are, I think Rich will probably explain that to us and talk to us a little bit more about how the Park Service handles digital documentation. So welcome.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for coming to attend this. It's a shame to bring you inside after such a nice time outside at lunch. Anyways, Megan said I actually provide kind of administrative oversight for the 3 documentation programs, and then am the chief of the Historic American Engineering Record. Catherine Lavoie and Paul Dolinsky fill out the chief positions in the Historic American Building Survey and the Historic American Landscape Survey. Let me see where my, here we go. Okay, the 3 programs, as Megan mentioned, the HABs program was dates from 1933. It is the oldest of the federal preservation programs and has miraculously remained in existence to this day. It was joined in 1969 by the HARE program and in 2000 by the HALS program. So just as HABs was formed with the recognition that the historic buildings that they then recognized as 1850 and earlier were quickly disappearing. So HARE in 1969 was a recognition that we were losing some of our oldest and most significant industrial sites like the New England textiles, steel mills in the Pittsburgh, Monongahela Valley, and other areas. And then the landscape survey was a recognition in 2000 of the growing significance of thinking more in a kind of a large scale context of that landscapes provide. So the programs are, let's see. The programs have been united by one consistent theme, and that's that all the documentation has three forms. There are large format photographs, measured and interpretive drawings, and historical reports. So they're curated at the Library of Congress, and I'll discuss that in a second. But that's one of the things that distinguishes this kind of documentation from some of the digital documentation we see now. And that's that the format is consistent, and it's been consistent over time. So you kind of learn what to do, and you know what to expect when you're going to reference it. And it has significant value because of that. The documentation all conforms to the Secretary of the Interior standards. The standards were put into place in 1983, but grew out of the HAB standards, which were set in the early 1930s, and which they themselves grew out of the standards that had been developed by AIA members and others doing documentation in the 19-teens and 20s. So the standards are fairly old, but they're very general, but they've proven to be very durable. And that is that they adequately convey the significance of a resource. They are accurately prepared from reliable sources. They're durable, standard, and reproducible, and they're clear and concise. And that's all we ask of any of the documentation that we send over to the library, is that they do meet those standards. We've used laser scanning in a variety of contexts for about a dozen years. The earliest of the projects was the Statue of Liberty, and there we used scans that were done initially by Texas Tech University, and that we then interpreted and moved into drawings that went to the library. We've used it in a number of other Park Service sites and non-Park Service sites, the Carlsbad Caverns, Iceberg Staircase. You'll see the NASA shuttle orbiter, the ironclad Cairo in Vicksburg, Mississippi, the Pukahoa Heiau in Hawaii, the totems in Sitka, Alaska, and Flanders Field in Belgium, as part of the large-scale documentation we're doing of all of the U.S.-owned World War I cemeteries in Europe as we move toward the centennial of World War I. One of our special projects was done with a partnership with the State Department, and it was in Ghazni in Afghanistan. These are, I apologize for the misspelling of Ghazni at the top there. There was these two towers, they're Victory Towers. They date from the 12th century, and they have been changed over time as weather and passing vehicular traffic have shaken them and moved and helped deteriorate them more. And as part of a cultural exchange and a way for the State Department to point up the cultural values in Afghanistan, we worked with them to develop documentation on this. And it was actually a very large project in which we were able, in the end, to bring several Afghan architect students to the United States through U.S. ICOMOS to work with them to do the drawings. So we had two team members, Dana Lockett and Paul Davidson, who flew to Afghanistan, and in 2 days in 120-degree heat, wearing Kevlar vests and helmets and surrounded by military personnel, scanned as much as they could of the historic sites. And this is one place where scanning really shows its value, because they only had 2 days. The rule at that time was more than 2 days, and the Taliban learned where you were, and you could expect a strike. So in and out really quick, get what you can, get home and process it. So the project lasted a couple of years, and they did a great set of documentation, which we've got a special place for in the Library of Congress. It's sometimes useful to stand back and think, what do we do with the laser scan work that we all produce and then use for one purpose or another, and how effective is it in what we're doing? For us, we see it used in 3 different ways: for the physical conservation of the resource, for the creation of a permanent record at the Library of Congress, and for presentation and interpretation. And I'd like to kind of walk through each one of these for a few minutes and kind of look at some of the nuances that are associated with each. If you're a steward of a historic structure, you will invariably prepare or have somebody else prepare for you some kind of comprehensive report that looks at what's going on with that structure. You want to know all kinds of details that you're responsible for. And one of the key things, and one of the most useful things, is a set of measure drawings that help lay out what the structure is and what needs to be done to it. So existing conditions, as well as just the kind of overall layout of the structure, are significant. We have a number of older reports that have been based on HAB's, Hair and Hal's documentation. This is one that's particularly good from Washington, D.C. at Meridian Hill, where you actually have measured drawings of the landscape in which your botanical, all the botanical information is included in the drawings, as well as all of the built environment that was put in when, as the park's been modified over the years. Not using an actual formatted report, but taking its cue from the measured drawings we did, is this documentation that formed the basis of rehab work at a set of cotton gin manufacturing buildings in Prattville, Alabama, which is about 12 miles west of Montgomery. These buildings were, if you drive into the town, you come down Main Street, and it looks like you think you were in New England. Because of the nature of the buildings, and it's because Pratt was himself a New Englander who did move south over time during one point in his life, and then over time built these factories. The 1854 building we're looking at here is kind of a dogleg to it and a radiating truss structure, which creates a series of issues with roofing, especially when the roofing is not maintained over the years and so moisture begins to creep in. So they took the drawings and then took a bunch of photographs of the problem areas and then linked the photographs to the drawings, and that gave them a very clear sense of just what the problem, where the problems were. And then, and this is a success story because it was recently purchased by a consortium down there and is going to be redeveloped and used by both the city and some private groups. So now they're going to use this set of documentation to repair the roof and some of the other damaged timbers from the moisture that seeped in, and then move on with the use of the buildings. We had an earthquake here in 2011. The 1995 HABS drawings were brought out and used by Wisjani and the other engineering firms that did an analysis of the monument itself, and were able to note cracks and chips and other issues that came from the earthquake, and that were then used to scope the project for rehabilitation and repair. Ironically, in 2014, an outside group volunteered to come in and laser scan the monument, and I was talking to the person who was the superintendent at the time, and he said they're still waiting for even the data from the laser scanning. So the idea that the monument, I mean, it may receive big play on the front page of the Washington Post that, you know, the scanning of the Washington Monument, you know, is finally happening, and yet nobody, you know, a year and a half later has ever seen any results from that scan. Scanning, as I said, we use it a lot. We've used it on every project, probably just over 90 projects that we've used laser scanning on. So it's not something that machine we park in the back room and bring it out when we need it. We use it everywhere. Prince William Forest near here, the Camp 1 down there was being considered back about 6 or 7 years ago for, instead of being used as a summer camp, it was going to be turned into kind of a 9-month retreat kind of camp to bring youths in through programs and live there during 9 months. So the idea was to get documentation on the site before that happens so that we have a record of what it looked like originally and use that documentation to guide efforts to modify the buildings. Well, the scanning worked great, but the features of the mess hall, which is we're showing here, suggested to us that scanning was not going to be even near enough, because if you look at these windows, and those are pocket windows with pockets above and below the windows. That mess hall, you drop and raise those windows throughout the hall, and you turn that into an open-air pavilion. Scanning's great, but scanning doesn't capture that. And you need somebody with a measuring tape and with sketching abilities to kind of move from window to window and figure out just what is going on there, and then be able to represent that so that as they get into working with the building to adapt it to the reuse, they have a good record of what it is. And scanning, for as good as it is, just can't capture those kind of hidden features. Scanning also requires that you pay attention to what you're looking at, and that you put your scanner in the right place. See on the left, 1934 drawings from the Historic American Building Survey, which are a really nice set of drawings, and if you've never really spent some time looking at a good set of drawings, you should take a look at those. On the right is a drawing that was created from a 3D laser scan, where it was kind of a quick in and quick out, scan it, and then let's draw it up. There's something missing from that. And that's probably because of where they had the scanner placed. It just kind of shot up past that front precipice and just missed that dome altogether. So you have to really pay attention in the field, and you also have to give yourself enough time in the field to do what you need to do. You sort of need to get to know the structure you're looking at. And that's one of the things that with laser scanning, you're quick in and out. Compared to documentation, hand measuring, you don't spend near as much time with the resource as you did then. And while you may come away with a lot of data, you oftentimes miss a lot of data that you should come away with. The Taos